salutogenic communication rather than pathogenic communication. So I think one of the things that I really struggled with when I first started seeing kids was that I didn't really know what to say to parents. And I want you guys to feel confident by the end of this in how to communicate in a salutogenic model, in a health promotion model, rather than this is the problem with your baby and we're going to fix that problem and then you're done. So I never wanted a paediatric practice, but this gorgeous little one, he's basically the reason that I do. So he was born prematurely. Some of you might have heard this before. He spent 5 weeks in special care before we got him home. And yeah, I had all the pathogenic conversations I could have. So I've taken this from Michael Hall's ICPA class. And this is looking at the difference between the pathogenic model and the salutogenic model. So when we are looking at pathogenic communication, a lot of that is to do with prevention, early detection. In my case, it was he's going to be developmentally delayed. He's going to be the sick kid in the class. These are all the problems that you've got going on with him. It was very much kind of putting you to know where you stand and to basically know what you've got ahead of you. But it was very much in a fear-based model. It was be worried about people coming in to speak to you, be very mindful when you go to the supermarket. It's a lot of fear-based stuff. And essentially, I had a get out of jail card because there was this reason that there were going to be all these problems with my child and I didn't have to do anything. So hierarchical, the pediatrician was up here and I was down here and I had to do as I was told. And they told me, these are normal, these are where your son is, it's just how it is. So the salutogenic approach then on the other side over here is really looking at how can we maximize the innate expression of everything that is good within this child. So rather than being a passive participant where you've got absolutely nothing you can do, you're actually going to take an active role as a parent. So we're giving you we're sort of empowering you to know that there are things that you can change so that you can help change your child's future. So it's a much more positive approach, and the joy of this is that we get to give this hope and this level of possibility to the parents that they might otherwise not have had. So again, going down to the practitioner role, this is a partnership. It's not me telling you what you can and can't do. It's, hey, let's come together and work out a plan of action and a process that we can work through together. If you want help with lifestyle stuff, we can help you with that. If we work together on this, that's when we're going to start to see this function improve. That's when we're going to see the optimization of this life expression. So it's very much working with the person in front of you and recognizing that not everybody is going to want the same outcome. So again, pathogenic or salutogenic. Obviously, this was my experience with my child, and I just want to show you something here. This is my husband, and this is my baby, and this is the first time he got to hold him. He was about 3 days old. So he's got like an ironing board on his arm. He's got, I don't know if you can see the little wire down here. That is hooked onto a drip. That was thread through his ankle, all the way up the blood vessels into his groin, and that's how he was fed. So you can see there is absolutely nothing normal about that. So when parents, obviously Steve's talking about trauma there, when parents have had the extreme end of trauma, birth trauma, they can smell BS. I was very careful with it there. They can smell it a mile off. So when you're communicating with parents, the first step before they even get into your office is all about offering hope. So people are going to see your social media, they're going to see your website, they're going to listen to podcasts, the emails you send out when you confirm an appointment. All of these things, they're all methods of communication that you have before they've even got into your office. You have to be very, very aware that obviously we've got the ASA guidelines, so we've got to be very careful in what we can put there. So this is where I think the salutogenic model comes in, because we're not saying, hey, if you've had a cesarean, we can treat your baby for that. We're not saying if you've got reflux or if you've got colic, we're not saying that we treat any of these conditions when we're looking at it with a salutogenic approach. So I think that's why this is something that's really, really important to understand. So my whole website has been ASA approved. You'll notice if you follow me on any of the social media, on my business page, I don't talk about conditions, I talk about optimizing health. It's all about lifestyle stuff rather than if you've got this problem, we'll fix this. So I think this is something that you guys can really sort of go away today, have like an inventory, an audit, couldn't think of the word, of all of these areas that you're communicating before the person's even in your practice. And you can look at where you can sort of level up that vibe a little bit so that you are talking about optimization as much as possible. And then you've got when they're in the practice. I'm going to take a drink here. So as I said, everybody who has been through some sort of trauma, they really understand the value of needing to trust somebody. So we have so much more communication that comes from our non-verbal cues than from what we actually say. So people want to know that you're listening to them. Whatever you do, don't make anything that they've done wrong. Whatever choice they make, be supportive of it. So that's really, really important. But ultimately, if you want to create a relationship with these families, they need to trust you. If you're saying and selling and telling and, you know, barking at them, they're not going to listen to you. But if you're genuinely curious and you're trying to learn about them and you're really an open book for them, that's when you're going to start to build the trust. And then that's when you can set the seeds about these salutogenic principles. They will come into you with a problem. And I think it's our role to kind of be there and acknowledge that problem, but kind of change the dialogue to what we need them to understand from our perspective. Pardon me. So there are some absolute gems of golden rules. So the first thing is please, 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 please get some pediatric training. There are so many people that will wing it. And I've heard a few people say that, you know, it's just small adults. Babies and children are not small adults. There's so many amazing, amazing people out there who can teach you technique. So obviously Steve, Elizabeth Davison does some really great seminars. We've got the ICPA who are amazing. There are so many people. Kelly McLaughlin, who was on here the other day doing her pregnancy stuff, she's awesome. We are so, so fortunate. So there is really no excuse to not have pediatric training if you want to see kids in your practice. And if you don't know what you're doing, refer to somebody else who does. And the reason I say this is it's not about me and my practice, it's about chiropractic. And I don't see athletes. I honestly, my husband got knocked off his bike, broke one of the bones in his foot, and I couldn't even remember the bones in the feet. I don't see athletes. I will quite happily say, I don't see athletes. Go and see someone who does. So I've got a bit red there, a little bit embarrassed admitting that. But if you don't know what you're doing, people can smell it a mile off. So just be honest and just be open. And there will be people in your area who do actually want to see the babies, who want to see the kids. So I'm hoping that if you're watching this, you're wanting to get some more training in. So it's a good thing. So the next thing is you don't have to know every condition known to man. I think that's one of the reasons that I didn't want to go into pediatrics. And I say this again as a parent of a preemie. I knew everything about every single procedure, every medication. I knew all the numbers. I knew what each beep, when we were in the hospital, different machines made different beeps. I knew all of that. And if I'd have gone to somebody who pretended they knew what they were talking about when they actually had no clue, I would sense it a mile off. And it's much more appropriate to be humble and be like, I don't know. So just as an example of this, one of our follow-ups with George was to go to the pediatric dietitian. And so we were at this argument where we were talking about breastfeeding. I was breastfeeding him, but he was small for gestational ages and then continued to be small. So they were saying basically I wasn't eating enough to feed him properly. so I should put him on formula. So we had this discussion, we're going back and forth, and one of the things I asked about weaning was coconut oil, because of the fats being similar to the fats in breast milk. Anyway, irrelevant. She sat and Googled it and read a Wikipedia article in front of me. How much do you think I trusted anything she said after that? So if you don't know, admit it. Like, do you know what? I actually don't know. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go away. I'm going to look into it, and I will let you know what I found at the next appointment. People will trust you so much more if you take that approach. And never make promises you can't keep. This, I think, is one of the biggies. You don't know. Like Steve has just said, he had the Kiss 2 people coming in, and he's a guru, and he was struggling with some of these babies. So don't make a promise that you can fix something when you've got absolutely no idea, because just as we're all different and unique, these babies are all different and unique as well. So we have to honor that we don't really have all the answers, but we will do our best. So how do I come to explain what's going on with these babies? I like to keep everything as simple as possible. I think probably for my benefit as much as for theirs. When you get into a fizz and a tears about trying to speak specifically to a particular problem, that's when you can kind of go down the rabbit hole of trying to fix that problem. So I bring everything back to stress physiology. So something that is really, really important is that mum understands that everything that she's experienced in her pregnancy, the baby experiences too. So we talk about thoughts, traumas, and toxins all the time anyway. This is just as relevant for a baby who is clearly stressed out. So when mum's pregnant, and I always take it back to like the simplest. So mum, when you're pregnant and you had that pint of beer, and she'll go, "What? Why didn't you drink beer?" "Well, you can't drink beer." "Why can't you drink beer?" It's that kind of dialogue, like keeping it really, really simple, because she's not going to sit there and go, "Oh, well, I didn't drink beer because I didn't want my baby to be alcoholic." The reason she didn't drink beer is that she wanted that baby to develop as well as it possibly could. And so it's trying to tease these little things out so that they know that they're already in the mindset of optimizing it, because then we can link together optimizing the health. So every stressful event that she had, her cortisol levels will have spiked and gone up through the roof. But of course, just in the same way as if she had a pint of beer, that will have filtered through the placenta into the baby. All those stress hormones are going to do the same thing. So that's going to then set the baby into stress physiology. Now, what should happen, mum gets stressed, stress response goes down, baby gets stressed, baby stress response goes down. 9 times out of 10, your mums are going to have had stress levels that were up and up and up and continued pretty much quite high throughout their pregnancy, especially if you have somebody who's had a traumatic birth. Again, as a mum, they're going to go, "Oh my God, it's my fault." So this is where the reassurance is really, really important. Like, stress is all around us. What should happen is we should have this peak and then it should drop again. And that's what we want for you, and that's what we want for your baby. Sometimes that stress just keeps coming at us and we don't have the ability to adapt. But what we're going to do now is everything that we can do to help decrease your baby's stress response, and yours too. It's not going to undo the stuff that's gone wrong, but it's also not making her wrong, because you've got to remember while you're having these conversations, and everything I'm saying is to mum because I generally see the mums, but it applies just as much to dads, to adoptive parents, like whoever you're speaking to, that person loves that child that's right there. So we want to be building relationships with them. Traumas to mum. So actually, incredibly, I think there are a lot more falls onto bumps than people necessarily let on. I had a lady who, she loved walking, and she was out walking probably 2 or 3 weeks before she had a baby, and she slipped on some wet leaves and fell and landed right side of her bump down. So obviously went through triage and all of that. those little things, although they're then triaged by the midwives and then sent on their way, they have the power to alter the baby's experience in the womb as well. And of course, we know toxins. So if the mum and the baby are in stress mode over and 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 over, we know that those neurons are going to fire quicker. And so the baby becomes hardwired for stress. And then when baby's born, they're already kind of in a war zone. So they then are primed for danger. And so just like with adults, when we start talking about how we have a stress response, we have the tiger, and we go into all the James Chestnut stuff, which is awesome. Exactly the same thing happens with baby. So when a baby's in defense mode, we see that it wants to feel safe. How does it feel safe? It wants to be by mum or dad. So one of the things it's going to do is it's going to have that really hyperactive Moro reflex. So how does baby sleep? Not that well. Okay. So when you put your baby down to bed, what happens? Oh, it does this. Okay. So, and then you start to explain why that's stress physiology. If we can then dampen down that stress response, do you think that will help your baby? Yes. And so it's kind of taking the findings that you have, not making them pathological wrong, but making them make sense. Do you think that's a really, really intelligent thing that your body is, that your baby's body is doing right now? And I think when you take it into that perspective where everything that's going on in your body is actually there to serve you rather than something going wrong, you're not ever going to turn around and say, well, ignore everything the pediatrician has said, because those pediatricians have absolutely saved that baby's life. You're just coming at it from a different perspective. So something that when parents have had a similar kind of pep talk as I had, where they're expecting all doom and gloom, I literally say to them, look, I have this perspective over here and they have this perspective over here. They've saved your baby's life, or, they've done all these tests, whatever it is that those pediatricians have done with that baby. Their perspective is on really damage limitation. Our perspective is on optimizing everything and being the best that you can be. So it's not that one is right and one is wrong. It's just that we're looking at it from two different sides. So if you can relate what's going on to stress physiology and to, isn't that a really intelligent thing? I think then that starts to help. So this is from Marty Rosen's ICPA slide. I have blazingly stolen it and just put it across. So I'm just going to put that out there. So the reason that this is so important is we know you pretty much have 2 years where the baby's brain is just, it is growing so quickly. It's setting down all these pathways. I recorded a podcast episode with him on my Pure Natural Pregnancy podcast, which Tom Waller keeps being like, you need to get back on it. So I might have to try and find some time for that. But it's really, really worth a listen. With it, I share that episode with my pregnant women as well. He talks about how if you were setting up a city, you would get all the infrastructure down first, and then you've almost created a city that can grow because you've got all the foundations there. And so he likens that to how the brain is working. So the first 2 years are really about optimizing as much as you can now so that those foundations are strong, and then you can build that city on top of it. So this is a bit of a double-edged sword, because as Steve has just said, if you're kind of in this position and this is your kind of idea of normal, then that's setting the foundation for that normal for the rest of your life. Your perspective on everything around you is going to be skewed. But we then have the bonus of neuroplasticity. So we can make such a huge change in such a small amount of time when you have these babies that are coming in before 2 years. So it's awesome. So yeah, we've got neuroplasticity on our side, and we can coach parents. So not only, where I was saying right at the beginning about the pathogenic and the salutogenic model, and how the pathogenic model is, here's a problem, here's what you do, and it's very kind of prescriptive. We get this lovely opportunity to be able to flow and vibe with the person and their lifestyle. So if they are needing some help maybe with weaning ideas, or if they are struggling with exercises, we can give them stuff that is tailored to their babies. And every time that we give them something to do, So like an exercise, one of my favorite exercises, again, comes from Michael Hall. It's having the baby on a ball, a gym ball. And because the right side of the brain is developing before the left side of the brain, so for the first 2 years, it's right side dominant. So they're on the ball, face down, you bring them forward and over to the right a bit. The idea being they're coming forward and they're looking up to the right. So people go, well, what's that fixing? It's not fixing anything, it's optimizing that brain development. So every single exercise you give, every little tidbit you give, make sure that you're giving it from a place of improving function rather than fixing a symptom. And that's going to start to change your conversations. So yeah, healing is a process. It's not a, this is here now and then it's going to be gone tomorrow. And really, we want to be talking about long-term care with people. We need to educate them as to what we're actually doing, that we're not just fixing these problems, but we're actually helping the brain to develop. And if you haven't yet read Heidi Horvick's book, that is phenomenal. So keep it as simple as possible. I said earlier, you don't need to know everything about every single problem known to man. We start with the universal premise that, you know, there's an intelligence in all matter, and we keep it as simple as possible. So this is literally what I say to people: your baby's body is just designed to grow, heal, and develop perfectly. There's such a wisdom in there that you might not currently understand what is going on and why this is happening, but you need to be able to trust that your body knows that your baby's body knows exactly what it's doing. And Jeannie Ohm always said life expresses intelligence, and I think that that is just so perfect when we're looking at kids. So a subluxated body has a distorted sense of reality. If you have nerve interference, wouldn't you be better off without it, whether you have symptoms or not? So this is something that Armand Rossi said, and I wrote it down in the seminar when he said it, because it made such sense to me. And I think when we're speaking to parents, it can be quite easy to talk about the problem without talking about the global effect. And I think this is where going into the stress physiology starts to bring it into more of a global effect. So if people can begin to understand that we need to have clear communication between our brain and our body, and that we need to have a nervous system free of interference, then it makes sense why I would bring my baby into you, even if they're not symptomatic. So I am nearly done. I want to finish up with this gorgeous little girl. Her name is Grace. She is just a superstar. Sorry, I had to close the window because next door's kids were being really loud in the garden, and now I'm absolutely baking in here. So Grace is a little girl who lives in Colchester. I started seeing her a couple of weeks before this photo was taken in August last year. She was born by cesarean. She was breech with low amniotic fluid. She had a little stint in the neonatal unit. And the interesting thing about Grace is she has a genetic, like an actual genetic malformation rather than an epigenetic expression. So this RHOB-TB2, there's 30 people in the world who have that mutation, but 3 have the exact same variant as her. So she is currently under neurology at one hospital. She's under genetics at Great Ormond Street. And basically nobody has got a clue what to expect. Nobody knows what's caused it. Nobody knows what to expect in the longer term. She had multiple seizures, and then she was put in a coma every time she had a seizure. She had surgery for the hip dysplasia as a result of the breech positioning. She had her pins out, I think it was earlier this year. I'm getting confused with all the dates. But she's really, really low tone. So she's 2 in that picture, and I'm literally like holding her up. You can just see the guns coming through. But she kind of is like, she literally cannot even hold her head at this point. So when I first saw her, she was going through intensive physio privately twice a week. And then we started her off getting her adjusted twice a week. And then we dropped it down to once a week after about 12 weeks. Within a couple of adjustments, her sleep started to improve massively. her constipation improved. So she'd been told that, or her parents had been told that part of her condition was that she was constipated. And she was going to the toilet every 3 or 4 days, and that was normal. And then she started having 1 to 2 bowel movements a day after her first adjustment. Every time she had a cold, it would go into a full-blown chest infection. And then when she did have a cold just before Christmas, it didn't progress, which obviously the parents decided was unusual enough to tell me. And then they added in weekly occupational therapy. So her improvement in her tone has come about over time. So she had her 1-year seizure free on the 9th of April. And I've made a £1 bet with her dad, who's a policeman, that she's going to be sitting unaided by the end of, I think, July. So we're going to see how that goes. But literally when she came in to see me, I was like, I have never heard of this condition. I'll look it up, but I probably won't even understand the research out there. I'll be honest. And they were like, yeah, that's cool. Most of the neurologists don't understand it either. I don't know what changes you're going to see with her, but I do know that if her body is free of nerve interference, she is going to function better. She's going to grow better. She's going to heal better. She's going to develop better. You might see a 5% improvement. You might see a 1% improvement. I don't know. But we can give it a go and see how you feel with it. They're still coming in. They can't wait for me to be back open because they know that this is having a beneficial effect on her. Now, I am not saying that this is all chiropractic, because she's having the chiro, she's having the physio, she's having the occupational therapy, she's having hydrotherapy, she's having so many therapies. But it's that ability to communicate hope that I think really, really makes a difference. So the whole purpose of the salutogenic principle is really to improve function and resilience. So when you start to speak to function and resilience, I think it changes the conversation, and it's never, ever more important than to have those conversations with the parents of the peds. So that's me. I am done.